She was made to wed an obese duke at 18, until the wedding night exposed the reason. The sky was painted in shades of bruised purple and cold silver as the carriage rolled down the winding path to Blackthorn Castle. Elijah sat inside, her hands clenched around the edge of her cloak, staring at the dark trees passing by. At 18, she was to wed a man she had never truly seen, a man her family insisted would secure their future. Yet fear and unease coiled tightly in her chest. Her father had spoken with pride weeks before. The Duke is powerful, wealthy beyond measure, and connected to the crown. You will bring honor to our family, Elijah. You will do your duty. Elijah's heart had ached at those words, duty. A cage of gilded chains that promised safety yet demanded surrender. She had been raised to obey, to smile, to marry for alliances, never for love. And yet, the thought of the Duke, with his rumored grotesque form and chilling reputation, made her stomach twist. The castle emerged from the mist like a sleeping giant. Blackstone towers pierced the clouds, and dark walls sprawled across the hillside, their shadows swallowing the moonlight. The servants who greeted her in the courtyard bowed so low their heads nearly touched the cobblestones. Their eyes, wide and uneasy, whispered the same warning. This was no ordinary home, and the Duke was no ordinary man. Elijah's escort led her through corridors lined with tapestries of battles long past and portraits of grim ancestors. Their eyes seemed to follow her, accusing, judging, reminding her that history weighed heavily on every stone in the castle. Finally, she was brought before the Duke's study. A tall door of black oak swung open, and there he sat. Lord Gaius, Duke of Blackthorn, was enormous. His frame was heavy, and his presence seemed to fill the room like a dark tide. But what struck Elijah most was the way he held himself, upright, deliberate, and quietly commanding. He was not merely a man, he was a force. "You must be Elijah," he said, his voice low and surprisingly gentle. "I have been expecting you." She nodded, speech caught in her throat. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and yet there was a sadness buried deep within them. Something in that glance made her pause, a flicker of humanity beneath the layers of fear and rumor. "My lady," he continued, "the wedding is tonight. Soon you will wear my name. Do you understand what that means?" Elijah swallowed. "Yes, my lord," she managed. She wanted to say she did not understand, that she was terrified, that she did not want this life. But the words would betray her family, betray her upbringing. They would mark her as foolish, disobedient, unfit. Gaius leaned back, silent for a long moment, as if weighing her very soul. Finally he said, "Then come. The ceremony awaits." The chapel was a cavern of stone and candlelight, filled with the scent of incense and the soft murmur of distant voices. Nobles from across the kingdom had come, their eyes glittering with curiosity, judgment, and envy. Some whispered openly about the Duke's size, some about his past, but all had gathered to witness the joining of two lives, or so they thought. Elijah's fingers trembled as she clutched her bouquet, her mind racing. She could see the fear reflected in the polished floor beneath her, the same fear mirrored in her own eyes. And yet, when Gaius entered, a hush fell over the room. He moved with deliberate calm, his presence demanding attention without a single word. The air seemed to thicken, as if the shadows themselves leaned closer to watch. The ceremony began, and Elijah followed the motions as if in a dream. Vows were exchanged in a voice she barely heard. Rings slid onto fingers and names were spoken aloud. The world narrowed to a single point. The Duke beside her, his expression unreadable, yet somehow tender in the candlelight. After the ceremony, she was led to the chamber prepared for the wedding night. The hallways were silent except for the distant echo of footsteps and the whisper of banners swaying in unseen drafts. Elijah's pulse quickened with both dread and strange curiosity. She had imagined this night in countless fearful scenarios, each darker than the last. The chamber itself was grand. High ceilings arched above like the ribs of some sleeping beast. Tapestries of the Blackthorn lineage adorned the walls, and candles burned in sconces, casting flickering shadows. Gaius stood by the window looking out at the moonlit grounds, his silhouette enormous and imposing. "You may sit," he said softly, gesturing to a chair near the fireplace. "Or you may stand. It is your choice." Elijah sank into the chair, feeling the weight of every story she had heard about him. Every cruel word, every fearful glance, every whispered tale of a man twisted by wealth, power, and perhaps some darker force. For a long moment they simply regarded each other. Then Gaius spoke, his voice almost a whisper. "You must know I am not as I seem." Elijah stiffened. "What do you mean?" He turned, and for the first time the sadness in his eyes deepened, mingling with a quiet desperation. "This body," he said, gesturing to himself, "is not who I am. A curse has bound me, shaped me into what you see. I cannot undo it, not entirely. But you," his gaze lingered on her with intensity, "you must understand that there is more beneath this skin than you realize." Elijah felt the air tighten around her chest. She had expected grotesque, monstrous, terrifying. And yet she saw instead a man trapped, a man who bore both suffering and dignity. A flicker of pity, of empathy, ignited in her heart. But before she could respond, he said, "Do not look for beauty here. You may only find truth if you are brave enough." Her knees trembled. She wanted to speak, to ask 100 questions at once, yet words failed her. The weight of the unknown pressed against her. Something about the way he spoke, the quiet strength behind the sadness, made her realize that she was standing at the threshold of a life unlike any she had imagined. A life shaped not by ease, but by trials, by courage, and perhaps by love yet unclaimed. Then, as if the castle itself had waited for this moment, a sudden chill swept through the chamber. Shadows danced unnaturally along the walls. Candles flickered and guttered. The air smelled faintly of iron and old stone. Gaius stiffened. "It begins," he whispered. Before Elijah could ask what he meant, a figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, cloaked, and moving with silent purpose, the stranger stepped into the flickering light. Their face was hidden, but the menace in their presence made Elijah's breath catch. "You should not be here," Gaius said, voice hardening, a protective fire igniting where before there had been only solemn caution. "Leave her." The figure paused, tilting their head. Then with a soft, almost mocking laugh, they vanished into the shadows, leaving behind an icy silence that seemed to press against Elijah's skin. Elijah's heart raced. What was that?" she whispered. Gaius did not answer at once. He moved to stand beside her, his massive frame shielding her from the shadows. "A reminder," he said finally, "that the world beyond this castle is not kind, and that the curse is never idle." Elijah felt a shiver run through her. Her fear of him had not vanished, but it had shifted. Now she feared what hunted him and perhaps feared the unknown darkness that had always surrounded her new life. And yet, amidst that fear, a strange determination bloomed. She was young, yes, but not helpless. She would learn, she would watch, and perhaps she would understand the man before her, the curse that bound him, and the truth hidden behind centuries of shadow and legend. The night stretched on, silent except for the faint sound of distant wind and the crackle of the fire. Elijah sat, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the man who had seemed monstrous and now seemed tragically human. Finally, Gaius spoke, his voice softer now, almost tender. "Rest, Elijah. Tomorrow begins the true challenge, not of fear, not of duty, but of understanding. Can you see the man behind the shadow?" Before she could answer, her eyelids grew heavy, the exhaustion of travel, fear, and anticipation overtaking her. She felt herself drifting into a dreamlike state, where candlelight flickered like stars and shadows moved with purpose. And then, as sleep claimed her, a whisper brushed against her ear, not Gaius, not entirely human, but something older, something woven into the castle itself. "You have entered a house of shadows, and the first choice is never your own." Her heart leapt. The world she knew had ended at the castle gates. And as her consciousness slipped away, she sensed that her life, her fate, and perhaps even her heart were already entwined with the Duke and with the curse he carried. Cliffhanger: Elijah sleeps that night with a mind full of questions. The Duke is not what he seems. A shadowy figure has appeared, hinting that the curse is more dangerous than she could imagine. The story waits for the night's truth to unfold, a truth that will challenge everything she thought she knew about duty, fear, and the man she is to wed. The castle slept under a pale silver moon, yet the silence was not comforting. Shadows stretched and twisted along the walls of Blackthorn Castle, as if alive, whispering secrets to those who dared listen. Elijah awoke in her chamber, the candlelight soft and flickering, but her heart thumped with an urgency she could not explain. The events of the wedding day and the whispered warnings in the chapel lingered like smoke she could not shake. Gaius had not yet entered the room. The heavy curtains moved slightly with a cold draft, and a shiver ran down her spine. She rose, instinctively moving to the window to see the grounds below. The gardens were empty, yet the statues of previous dukes and duchesses seemed to stare at her with silent accusation, frozen eyes that felt too aware, too alive. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called, trying to steady her voice. The door opened, and Gaius stepped inside. He moved carefully, his large frame filling the space with a presence that was both protective and commanding. He wore a simple robe tonight, but it could not conceal the strange grace in his movements or the shadows that clung to him. "Good evening, Elijah," he said. There was no ceremony in his tone, only quiet seriousness. "I hope I did not startle you." "You didn't," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. I could not sleep," he nodded, as if understanding more than she had spoken. "I do not blame you. Many cannot. This castle, it does not forgive ignorance or fear easily. But it is time you understand the truth fully and without distraction." Elijah's curiosity surged, mingled with fear. "The truth?" she asked. "Yes," Gaius said, turning to the fireplace, where the flames cast tall, dancing shadows. "I told you before that I am not as I seem. Now you must see what lies beneath." Without another word, he gestured to the center of the room. The air shimmered slightly, as if the heat from the fire warped reality. Gaius placed a hand on the floor, and the shadows around him seemed to move with a will of their own. Then slowly, deliberately, he spoke an incantation in a language Elijah did not recognize. The shadows coalesced into forms, twisting and flowing like smoke. Shapes of ancestors appeared briefly, faces grim and eyes hollow, only to dissolve back into darkness. Elijah gasped. What is this?" "This is the history of my curse," Gaius said. "A lineage haunted by pride, betrayal, and a spell that bound my body to a form unbefitting my soul. It has made me heavy, yes, outwardly monstrous to those who cannot see deeper, but it is nothing compared to the chains it has placed upon my spirit." Elijah stepped closer, drawn by both fear and fascination. "Chains upon your spirit, does it mean you are trapped?" Gaius' eyes, usually so composed, glimmered with a rare vulnerability. "In a way, yes. I am trapped between appearances and truth, between the world's expectations and my own reality. And now you, Elijah, are part of this. I cannot shield you entirely, but I can guide you if you are willing to see beyond what others judge at first glance." The intensity of his words weighed upon her. For the first time, Elijah felt something stir that was not fear, empathy, perhaps, or a dawning understanding. She realized that the rumors of his grotesque form had concealed the truth. Gaius was a man cursed, yes, but a man who bore his suffering with dignity, whose mind and heart were sharp, who had endured loneliness and suspicion for decades. I want to understand," she whispered, feeling a strange courage rise within her. He gave her a faint nod of approval. "Then you must stay close. The curse is not idle, and neither are the forces that watch and wait for weakness. They will test both of us, Elijah. Do you trust me enough to face them?" Her heart thudded, but she met his gaze steadily. I will try." Gaius, lips pressed into a thin line. Try is all I ask. There are shadows in this castle that have no patience for hesitation. Even tonight, there are those who wish to see me fall and anyone I hold dear. Before Elijah could question him further, a sudden sound echoed through the chamber, a faint, metallic clink, like the striking of distant chains. She turned sharply, but the room appeared empty. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Gaius tensed. "Yes, they have begun to move. Some shadows are not bound by these walls, they come from beyond, drawn by the curse itself. You must not speak unnecessarily. Silence can protect you more than words tonight." He gestured for her to follow. Together they moved through the corridors of the castle, their footsteps muted against the thick carpets and stone floors. As they passed portraits of previous dukes, the eyes in the paintings seemed almost alive, watching, judging, warning. Elijah felt a shiver crawl along her spine. They reached a narrow staircase leading to the lower halls. "Here," Gaius said, "is where the first test begins. The curse manifests most strongly in the places where the family's sins were greatest. You must see it to understand it." The air grew colder with each step. Shadows pooled in the corners, moving like liquid. Elijah's fingers tightened around the railing, yet she did not look away. There was a strange thrill in the danger, a sense that understanding the darkness meant understanding him. At the bottom, a great hall stretched before them, empty except for a single figure hunched near the far wall. Its form was human enough to recognize, yet its movements were unnatural, gliding without sound. Elijah's breath caught. Gaius stepped forward, his voice ringing through the hall. "You know why you are here," he said to the figure. "Leave or face the consequences of your intrusion." The figure paused, tilting its head. "He is mine," it said in a whisper that was more felt than heard. "You cannot hide her from me, not tonight." Elijah's heart raced. She wanted to step back, to flee, yet Gaius moved closer, placing himself between her and the shadow. His presence seemed to push the darkness away, forming a protective barrier. "You will not touch her," he said, voice low, cold, and commanding. "I will not allow it." The shadow hissed, a sound that seemed to reverberate in the very walls, then dissipated into the air as suddenly as it had appeared. Elijah could feel the chill lingering, yet it was Gaius, warmth and strength that anchored her. She looked up at him. What was that?" Gaius' expression was unreadable. "A reminder," he said. "The curse draws others, some curious, some malicious. This castle will test you. The nights will not be safe until you understand its nature, and even then understanding does not mean immunity." Elijah swallowed hard. I see, but why me? Why bring me into this?" "Because you are not ordinary," Gaius said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You are not like others who fear or mock. You may be the first to see me as I truly am, and perhaps the first to help me break the chain that binds me." The weight of his words sank into her chest. She felt both fear and a strange determination. The Duke was unlike anyone she had ever known. He was frightening, yes, yet noble and brave in a way that stirred something in her. Perhaps she was meant to understand him, or perhaps fate had other plans. A sudden draft blew through the hall, extinguishing some candles and leaving the room in half-light. Shadows flickered across the walls, stretching toward them as if testing their courage. Elijah stepped closer to Gaius, feeling the strength of his presence beside her. "You are not alone," he said softly. "Not tonight, not ever while I can prevent it." Her throat tightened. For the first time, she felt the dangerous allure of something deeper than duty or fear. The promise of trust, the possibility of connection, and the strange pull of destiny entwined with a man who was both cursed and noble. Then from the far corner of the hall, another movement caught her eye, faint, fleeting, almost imperceptible. A shape, dark and silent, watching from the shadows. Elijah's breath caught. Gaius noticed it too. His eyes narrowed and his hand went to the hilt of a dagger that seemed more ceremonial than practical, yet its presence radiated authority. "They are watching," he said, "always watching, and soon they will act." Elijah's pulse quickened. Her mind raced with questions. Who were these watchers? What did the curse truly demand? And what role had she been brought to play in this centuries-old darkness? The night seemed endless, yet in the quiet moments, she felt the first threads of understanding take hold. The Duke was not merely a figure of fear. He was a man trapped by forces beyond his control, and she had been drawn into the story not as a pawn, but as a witness and perhaps as something more. The hall grew silent again, the shadows receding, leaving only the flickering candlelight. Gaius turned to her, his expression softer now, almost human in its vulnerability. "Rest, Elijah," he said. "Tomorrow will demand more courage than you have known, and I cannot face it alone. If you remain by my side, you may yet discover the truth before it is too late." Elijah nodded, heart pounding. She felt both fear and anticipation, knowing that her life had irrevocably changed. She was no longer merely a young noblewoman entering an arranged marriage. She was a witness to a curse, a partner in a shadowed journey, and perhaps the first person to see the man behind the legend. As she closed her eyes, the flickering shadows whispered around her, carrying promises and warnings alike. The castle had begun to reveal its secrets, and tomorrow the true test would begin. Cliffhanger. In the dark corners of the castle, unseen figures stir, drawn to the curse. Elijah and Gaius are no longer safe. Forces beyond the Duke's control are preparing to act, and the first of the castle's hidden trials will strike before dawn, forcing Elijah to confront dangers that are as supernatural as they are personal. The morning mist clung to the castle walls like a living shroud, softening the edges of Blackthorn Castle, yet deepening the shadows in which secrets waited. Elijah walked beside Gaius through the grand corridors, her footsteps echoing faintly. The events of the previous night lingered in her mind, the shadowy figures, the whispered threats, and the strange glimpse of the curse that bound the Duke. Gaius led her to a small, hidden chamber deep within the castle. Its walls were lined with books, scrolls, and jars filled with substances that shimmered like captured starlight. The room smelled of old paper, herbs, and something faintly metallic. A single candle burned in the center, casting its golden glow over the objects. "This room has existed in secrecy for generations," Gaius said. "Here is where my ancestors recorded the history of the curse, the spells, and the warnings that have shaped this family. If we are to understand it, we must begin here." Elijah's fingers traced the spines of the ancient tomes, each heavier with time than with gold. Her curiosity burned. "Why has no one tried to break it before?" she asked softly. "Many have tried," Gaius replied, "but none succeeded. The curse feeds on weakness, fear, and pride. Only those willing to see clearly, beyond appearances and beyond selfish desire, can hope to alter it." He opened a thick book bound in dark leather. Its pages were yellowed, etched with symbols that seemed to shift when looked at too long. He traced a finger over the faded ink. "It began centuries ago," he said, voice low. "An ancestor betrayed a spirit of immense power, thinking wealth and prestige could protect him. Instead, he bound our family line with a spell. Every heir carries its mark, every one of us is chained to this fate." Elijah's pulse quickened. "So your size, your appearance, it's part of the curse," Gaius nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "Yes. The body is only the surface. The true burden is the weight of shame, isolation, and mistrust. Every person I meet sees only what is outward, never the struggles within. They do not see the loneliness, the longing, the desire for something beyond power and fear." Elijah felt a wave of empathy. For so long she had feared him as monstrous, as grotesque. But now the truth revealed something different. A man trapped by circumstance, by magic, and by history itself. She felt drawn to him, not just by curiosity, but by the sense that she could help him. Perhaps even heal the centuries of sorrow that clung to his soul. "Then we must find the source of the curse," she said, determination settling into her chest. We must see it, face it, and end it. Gaius' eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed a small, genuine smile. You speak as if you understand what this path demands. Few do. It is dangerous, and the castle itself resists those who seek truth. But perhaps together we may succeed. They spent the day preparing. Gaius gathered talismans, maps of the castle and its surrounding lands, and scrolls containing spells of protection. Elijah memorized symbols, phrases, and warnings, absorbing knowledge as quickly as she could. The weight of the task was heavy, but so was the excitement of a shared purpose. As twilight fell, Gaius took her hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and Elijah felt a warmth in it that belied his size and the shadow of the curse. "Tonight, we begin our journey outside the castle," he said. "The source is hidden in a forest beyond the northern wall, a place few dare enter. The curse will test us every step of the way." The forest greeted them with a silence that was almost deafening. Mist clung to the ground, curling around their ankles like living fingers. Trees arched overhead, their branches intertwining like a natural cathedral. Faint whispers drifted through the air, voices half-heard, speaking in a language Elijah did not know. "This forest is old," Gaius said, his voice echoing slightly. "Older than the castle, older than most of the legends we know. It remembers the sins of men, and it will not let us pass lightly." Elijah tightened her grip on his hand. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. He glanced at her, studying her face in the dim light. There was a moment of hesitation, then a soft smile. "I believe you, but you must know courage alone is not enough. The forest will show us our fears, and only truth can guide us beyond them." The first test came quickly. Shadows on the path shifted unnaturally, forming shapes that resembled people from Elijah's past. Friends she had lost, family who had scolded her, faces of people who had belittled or doubted her. Whispers surrounded her, mocking her fear, her doubts. Elijah froze. The shapes moved closer, reaching for her with hands that were almost real. "Gaius," she called, her voice trembling. He stepped beside her, placing a strong hand on her shoulder. "Do not flee," he said calmly. "Look at them, see them as they are, not threats but reflections. This is the curse testing you. You must acknowledge it, not fight it." Taking a deep breath, Elijah met the shadow's eyes. She thought of her family, of the lies she had been told, of the expectations that had suffocated her. "I see you," she said firmly. "I am not afraid. You do not control me." The shadows wavered, then dissolved into mist. Elijah felt a rush of relief, but it was fleeting. The path ahead remained dark, uncertain, and filled with dangers she could not yet name. They pressed on, deeper into the forest. Gaius spoke rarely, his focus absolute. Every now and then he would stop, muttering words under his breath, tracing symbols in the air with his fingers. Elijah watched him closely, feeling a mixture of awe and admiration. The Duke, whom the world feared, was guiding her through darkness with patience and skill. Hours passed. The forest thickened, the air growing colder. Strange sounds echoed. A rustle of leaves that seemed too deliberate, the snap of a branch where no animal could be, and distant laughter that was not human. Yet Elijah found strength in Gaius' presence. His shadow fell over her like protection, and she realized she trusted him more than anyone she had ever known. Finally, they reached a clearing. In its center stood an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and engraved with symbols that pulsed faintly with light. Elijah felt a shiver run down her spine. This was the source, the curse's heart. Gaius knelt before it, placing his hands upon the cold stone. "The curse is bound to this place," he murmured. "It is tied to our family's choices, to the betrayal of an ancestor who thought greed was stronger than respect for power beyond human understanding." Elijah knelt beside him. "How do we stop it?" Gaius' gaze met hers, intense and unflinching. "By facing it fully. By accepting the truths we fear, and offering courage, humility, and trust in the bond between us. Only together can we confront the darkness and survive its wrath." The altar glowed brighter. Shadows rose from the ground, twisting into forms that were neither animal nor human. They hissed and wailed, pressing closer, testing their resolve. Elijah felt panic rise. Her fingers trembled, her chest tightened. I don't know if I can. Gaius' hand found hers, strong and grounding. You can, he said. Do not let fear rule you. Trust me, trust yourself. Trust what we share. The curse cannot bind what is willing to see clearly. Together they rose, hands joined, facing the swirling darkness. Elijah's heart pounded, but she remembered the lessons of the shadowed figures in the forest, the truths she had embraced. She lifted her chin, facing the altar and its guardians. The shadows lunged, then froze as if startled. A wave of energy pulsed from the stone, reaching out, testing them. Elijah and Gaius held their ground, each heartbeat in sync, their courage feeding the other. And then, as the tension reached its peak, the ground beneath them shivered. The altar cracked, and a blinding light erupted, forcing them to shield their eyes. When the brilliance faded, Elijah felt herself lifted, suspended in a strange, dreamlike state. The forest had vanished. She floated above a swirling void, colors and shapes beyond comprehension twisting around her. And in that space, a voice echoed, both gentle and terrible. You have come far, but are you ready to face the truth of the bloodline? Her stomach turned. She looked down. Gaius was beside her, unchanged in form but holding her hand firmly. Whatever comes, he said, we face it together. Elijah nodded, though fear still clutched her. She realized now that the curse was not merely a spell. It was a test of character, of trust, of heart, and the path ahead would demand more courage than she had ever known. The void shimmered, and the first shape began to emerge, something ancient, something that had waited centuries to judge, to challenge, to demand repayment for old sins. Cliffhanger, the true source of the curse, manifests, a spectral, ancient figure from Gaius, bloodline, powerful and terrifying. Elijah and Gaius must face it together, but its test will push them to the edge of fear, trust, and loyalty. What the figure demands could change everything. The void shimmered with colors Elijah could not name, twisting and folding like the very air had become liquid. Shapes of light and shadow danced around her, whispering truths she did not fully understand. Beside her, Gaius held her hand firmly, a solid presence amidst the chaos. You are ready, a voice echoed again, both gentle and terrible like the wind over a grave. It was the figure from the forest, an ancient spirit tied to the Duke's bloodline, the origin of the curse. Its form was neither fully human nor fully spectral, its eyes deep pools of history and judgment. Elijah swallowed hard, drawing a shuddering breath. What do you want from us? To break the chains of your family, the voice said. You must face the truths of pride, betrayal, and fear. Only those willing to see clearly, who embrace courage and trust, may succeed. Only then may the curse be lifted. Gaius squeezed her hand. We can do this, he said, together. The figure's gaze swept over them, testing, weighing. Very well, but know this. One false step, one moment of doubt or selfishness, and the curse will consume all that you are. Elijah nodded, determination igniting in her chest. She had come too far, endured too much to falter now. She thought of the shadows in the forest, the whispers that had tried to break her, the danger that had stalked them in the castle. She thought of Gaius, a man judged by appearances, yet noble in ways no one else could see. She would not fail him or herself. The void pulsed, and suddenly they were separated. Elijah floated alone as the figure circled them, its eyes glowing brighter, probing the depths of her fears. Shapes formed from the darkness, images of her family, her past mistakes, her insecurities, all pressing in, demanding she flee, that she give in to fear. Elijah took a deep breath. I see you, she whispered, voice firm. I see all of you. You are not stronger than me. You are shadows, and I will not be afraid. The shadows wavered, and she felt the first weight lift from her chest. Courage, she realized, was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Beside her, Gaius faced his own trial. The spirit forced visions of his ancestors upon him, greedy men, cruel women, betrayals that had shaped the curse, and the faces of those who had doubted him, mocked him, or feared him. His mind reeled with centuries of guilt and shame. "You are not your ancestors," Elijah called out to him, her voice steady. "You are here, you are now, we are facing this together." Her words reached him. Gaius' shoulders squared, his gaze sharpened, and he spoke aloud, confronting the images. "I am not defined by their sins. I will choose my path, I will protect her, I will not fail." The figure hovered closer, its voice rising in a low, thunderous whisper. "You have courage, you have trust, but are you willing to sacrifice what you cherish to break the curse?" Elijah and Gaius exchanged a glance. They both understood the truth. The curse demanded more than bravery. It demanded selflessness, honesty, and unity. Without these, it could never be undone. "We are ready," Elijah said. "We face this together, no matter what it asks of us." The figure's form grew brighter, nearly blinding. Then, with a sudden, forceful motion, it struck a spectral blow at them. The air cracked with energy, and Elijah felt herself pulled, as if the very gravity of the void had shifted. Gaius tightened his grip on her hand, anchoring her, his presence grounding her in the storm. Pain shot through both of them, not just physical but deep in their spirits. Memories, regrets, and fears surged like waves, trying to break them apart. Elijah clung to Gaius, and Gaius clung to her, their trust forming a shield stronger than any magic. "Together," Gaius whispered. "Together," Elijah echoed. The figure paused, its glow dimming slightly. "Very well," it said. "You have chosen rightly. You have faced fear, accepted truth, and embraced each other's strength. The curse may be lifted, but only partially. You will emerge changed." The void trembled, then began to dissolve, slowly fading like morning mist. Shapes and colors vanished, leaving only the faint outline of the forest, the altar, and the two of them standing hand in hand. Elijah gasped, taking in the familiar surroundings of the clearing, yet everything felt different. The air was lighter, the shadows less oppressive, and the energy around the altar seemed cleansed, calm, and at peace. Gaius looked at her, his expression softened, but there was a quiet strength in it that had not been there before. "We did it," he said, voice low and steady. "The curse, it is broken, or at least it has been changed." Elijah looked at him, taking in the man beneath the legend. He was still large, still imposing, but his presence no longer carried the weight of shame or fear. There was dignity in his form, a quiet nobility that radiated from him. She realized that beauty was not in appearances. It was in courage, integrity, and the heart willing to face darkness. "You are incredible," she said softly. He smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and something warmer, something more human than she had ever seen in him. "So are you, Elijah. You were brave enough to face the darkness, to see me as I am, and to stand by me." They returned to the castle together, the forest now bathed in a soft, silver light. The shadows lingered faintly, reminders that the past never fully disappears, but they no longer threatened. Elijah felt a sense of calm she had never known in the castle's walls. The next days were filled with quiet moments and small celebrations. Servants and nobles alike seemed to sense the change in Gaius. There was respect now, a recognition not of his outward form but of his heart, his wisdom, and the trials he had endured. Elijah, too, changed. She had grown in courage, insight, and empathy. She understood that love was not given freely. It was earned, nurtured, and tempered by shared trials. And in her heart, she knew that she had earned it, and that she had found it in the most unexpected of places, with the man the world had feared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the castle in gold and shadow, Gaius and Elijah stood together on the balcony. The wind whispered around them, carrying with it the faint scent of the forest and the faint hum of magic that lingered from the ritual. "You changed me," Gaius said quietly, his hand brushing hers. "Not just by facing the curse, but by believing in me when no one else would." Elijah smiled, warmth spreading in her chest. No, you changed me too. You showed me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. That the heart can see beyond appearances, beyond shadows, and still find truth. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the sun disappear completely, leaving the castle bathed in twilight. The world was still imperfect, still full of shadows and challenges, but they knew they would face it together, stronger and wiser than before. Gaius took a deep breath, and for the first time he seemed unburdened, as if centuries of sorrow had been lifted from him. "We survived," he said, almost to himself. "We are free." Elijah rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth and strength of the man she had once feared, now the man she respected, trusted, and perhaps loved. "Yes," she whispered, "we are free." And in that moment, standing together in the fading light, they both knew that their journey was not just about breaking a curse. It was about transformation, understanding, and the kind of love that could survive shadows, trials, and the judgments of the world. Even as the last light of the day vanished, a sense of peace settled over Blackthorn Castle. The curse's hold had ended, the darkness had been faced, and two hearts had emerged stronger than before. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was theirs, shared, unafraid, and filled with the quiet promise of hope. And high above, the stars twinkled like silent witnesses, as if the universe itself acknowledged the courage, trust, and love that had freed the Duke and the young noblewoman who dared to see him as he truly was. The castle no longer felt like a prison. It was a home. The shadows no longer threatened. They lingered, faint reminders of the past, but the present belonged to them. And as Elijah and Gaius turned to face the halls together, hand in hand, both knew that the darkest night had passed, and the dawn was theirs to embrace.